I trained 847 days for this moment. 2 years, 3 months, and 19 days of 5 a.m. alarm clocks, ice baths, protein shakes that tasted like chalk mixed with regret, and long runs that made my knees feel like they belonged to a man twice my age. 847 days of telling myself that if I could just qualify for Kona, everything would mean something. I never imagined the worst pain of my life wouldn't come from the broken derailleur that sent me skidding across Arizona asphalt at mile 68, but from what I'd find in the parking lot 40 minutes later. The crash itself was almost beautiful, in a sick sort of way. I was descending a hill outside of Tempe, pushing 32 miles per hour, feeling like a god among mortals. My split times were perfect. My heart rate was exactly where it should be. I'd passed 11 riders in the last hour, and I could feel Kona calling my name with every revolution of my pedals. Then I heard it. A sound like a guitar string snapping inside a metal box. My chain didn't just break, it exploded. Links scattered across the road like confetti at a parade nobody wanted to attend. My rear wheel locked for half a second before the derailleur tore itself apart, and suddenly I was sliding across pavement at highway speeds with nothing between my skin and the road but a thin layer of lycra and optimism. I remember thinking very clearly as my left side made intimate contact with the asphalt. This is going to leave a mark. The medical team was on me within 90 seconds. I'll give Ironman credit. Their response protocols are impeccable. A woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense voice started assessing my injuries while her partner stabilized my bike to prevent further damage. As if the bike mattered anymore. "Sir, can you tell me your name?" "Derek Whitfield, bib number 847. I tried to sit up. Bad idea. "I'm fine. I can finish." "Sir, you have road rash covering approximately 15% of your left side, and your wrist is already swelling. You're not finishing anything today." "You don't understand. I've been training for 847 days. "Yes, sir. Your bib number was very on the nose." She smiled, but her hands were already reaching for the radio. "We're pulling you. I'm sorry." They loaded me into a medical cart and drove me back to the transition area. Every bump in the road felt like someone was taking a cheese grater to my hip. My wrist throbbed with a deep, nauseating ache that suggested something more than a sprain. And my mind, my analytical engineer's mind that had gotten me through 20 years in software architecture, was already calculating the recovery time, the training setback, the months I'd need to rebuild. I didn't know yet that the broken derailleur was the least of my problems. At the medical tent, they cleaned my wounds, wrapped my wrist in a temporary splint, and strongly recommended I go to the hospital for x-rays. I declined. Haley would be worried enough without me disappearing into an emergency room for 6 hours. Haley, my wife of 12 years. The woman who'd packed my race bag last night, kissed me good luck this morning, and promised to be waiting at the finish line with a cold beer and a warm smile. I pulled out my phone and typed a message. "Got hurt. Out of race. Heading to car now. Where are you?" The message showed as delivered immediately, then read, then nothing. That was unusual. Haley always responded within minutes. She was religious about it, one of those people who treated an unanswered text like a personal failing. I waited 5 minutes. 10. Tried calling. Straight to voicemail. Probably just crowded, I told myself. Bad cell reception near the venue. 1,000 reasonable explanations. I signed the discharge papers, grabbed my gear bag with my good hand, and started walking toward the parking lot. It was a beautiful Arizona day. The kind of day that makes you understand why people move to the desert despite the summers that could melt steel. Blue sky stretching forever. Mountains in the distance looking like God had painted them there just for the aesthetic. The parking lot was massive, easily 1,000 cars baking in the midday sun. I'd memorized where we parked. Row J, near the light pole with a dented base. Haley's white Lexus SUV, the one I'd bought her last year for her 38th birthday, because she'd mentioned once, just once, that she thought they were pretty. I spotted it from 50 yards away. Also spotted Kevin Brennan's black Ford F-150 parked suspiciously close. Kevin, my training partner for 2 years. The guy who'd pushed me through countless brick workouts, who'd told me I could qualify for Kona even when I didn't believe it myself. Good old Kevin, with his easy smile and his financial advisor wisdom, and his habit of showing up whenever I mentioned I'd be busy. My analytical brain processed the scene before my emotional brain could catch up. Arizona heat, 94 degrees. Air conditioning, clearly running, based on the subtle vibration of the Lexus's hood. Windows, slightly fogged despite the exterior temperature. Fogged windows. In the desert. In the middle of the day. I want to tell you that I charged forward like a man possessed. That I screamed and pounded on the glass and made a scene worthy of a daytime television drama. But that's not who I am. I'm the guy who solves problems, who gathers data before making decisions, who learned a long time ago that the loudest voice in the room is rarely the smartest one. So I walked up to the passenger side of my wife's vehicle, the vehicle I paid for, insured, and maintained. And I looked through the fogged glass with the calm detachment of a scientist observing a particularly disgusting specimen. Haley was straddling Kevin in the reclined driver's seat. Her blouse was open. His hands were where they absolutely should not have been. Their faces were pressed together in a way that left zero room for innocent explanation. Time stopped. Or maybe I stopped. It's hard to say which. I took out my phone. I took 3 photographs through the window, capturing everything from multiple angles before either of them noticed the shadow falling across the glass. My hands were steady. My breathing was normal. Some part of my brain had shifted into emergency mode, the same cold, calculating state I'd learned to access during the hardest parts of a triathlon, when the body wants to quit and the mind has to take over. Only then did I knock, 3 sharp raps with my good hand's knuckles. The sound was small, almost polite, like I was asking for directions, like I hadn't just watched my entire life collapse into a pile of shattered assumptions. Haley's scream was muffled by the window, but I could read it on her face. She scrambled backward, nearly kicking Kevin in the process, fumbling with her blouse buttons while her eyes, her beautiful green eyes that I'd loved for 12 years, went wide with something that looked a lot like terror. Kevin tried to open the driver's door. I stepped to my right and blocked it with my hip. The impact sent a fresh wave of pain through my road-rashed side, but I didn't flinch. Couldn't afford to. Stay in the car, Kevin. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Flat. Like I was reading lines from a script I'd never seen before. I'm only going to say this once. Derek, man, this isn't... His voice came through the cracked window, already loading up excuses like a weapon. This isn't what? What I think it is? What I can clearly see with my own eyes? What I have 3 photographs of on my phone right now? I held up the device, showed him the screen. That's what this isn't. Silence from inside the car. Haley was crying now, makeup running down her cheeks in twin rivers of mascara and guilt. Here's what's going to happen, I said, still in that eerily calm voice I didn't recognize. You have exactly 1 week to tell your wife. Megan, the mother of your children, the woman who thinks you're at this race cheering for me, just like she thinks you're at a lot of places you're apparently not. I watched his face go pale. 1 week, Kevin, or I tell her myself, with pictures. Derek, you can't just... I don't want your words. I want you gone. I want you out of that car, into your truck, and out of this parking lot within the next 60 seconds. Can you do that? Or do I need to find a security guard and explain why my wife is half-dressed in a vehicle registered in my name? Kevin scrambled. I've never seen a man button his pants that quickly. He was out of the Lexus and into his F-150 within 45 seconds, peeling out of the parking lot without looking back. which left me alone with my wife. Haley tumbled out of the passenger door, still fixing her clothes, tears streaming down her face. "Derek, please, let me explain. Give me the keys." "What?" "The keys to the car. The car that's in my name, the one I paid for. Give them to me." She handed them over with shaking hands. Her mascara was running. Her lipstick was smeared. She looked like a woman who'd been caught doing exactly what she'd been caught doing. "Derek, I'm so sorry, this wasn't supposed to..." "Wasn't supposed to what? Happen? Last this long? Get discovered?" I tilted my head, studying her like a specimen I'd never seen before. "Which part wasn't supposed to happen exactly?" "All of it. None of it. I don't know, She reached for my arm, then stopped when she saw the blood seeping through my jersey, the makeshift sling around my wrist. "Oh my God, what happened to you?" "I crashed at mile 68. Probably fractured my wrist. Definitely left a significant portion of my skin on the asphalt." I pocketed the keys. "But thank you for asking. Your concern is noted. Let me help you. Let me take you to the hospital. Find your own way home." I turned away. "Don't come to the house tonight." "Derek?" She grabbed my arm, my injured arm, and I couldn't completely suppress the wince of pain. She let go immediately, her face crumpling with fresh guilt. "Oh God, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to..." 12 years, Haley." I still wouldn't look at her. Couldn't. "You had 12 years to talk to me, to tell me something was wrong, to say you weren't happy. 12 years of marriage, and apparently you were too busy to have that conversation. That's not fair. You want to talk about fair?" Now I turned. Now I looked at her. Really looked. And whatever she saw in my face made her take a step backward. "I crashed at mile 68. Probably fractured my wrist. Lost my chance at Kona. And I thought the worst part of my day would be explaining to my wife why I failed. I thought the worst part would be admitting that 2 years of training just went down the drain." I laughed, and even I could hear how hollow it sounded. I had no idea how wrong I was. I walked away. Every step hurt. My hip, my shoulder, my wrist, my everything. But I kept walking. I could hear Haley behind me, crying, calling my name, but I didn't turn around. Couldn't afford to. I found an Uber. Went to a hotel near the airport. Sat on the bed with a bag of ice on my wrist and the air conditioning blasting and the silence pressing in from all sides. I didn't cry, didn't drink, didn't throw things. I made a list. That's what I do. That's who I am. When the world falls apart, I make a list and I solve the problem, one line at a time. 1. How long? 2. Who knows? 3. Protect assets. 4. Document everything. Then I called my college roommate, Tyler Dawson. Tyler, who'd gone to law school while I went into engineering. Tyler, who'd become a divorce attorney in Phoenix because, in his words, the market's recession-proof. People will always hate each other. "Tyler, it's Derek. I need your help." He could hear it in my voice. He'd known me for 20 years. Of course he could hear it. "When and where?" "Tomorrow morning, your office, as early as you can. 8 a.m. Don't talk to her before then. Don't go home. Don't respond to any texts or calls. Can you do that?" "Yes." "Derek." A pause. "I'm sorry, man." "Yeah," I said. "Me too." I hung up and stared at the ceiling for a long time. Then I pulled up our shared phone plan account. I paid the bill, so I had the login, and started digging. What I found made the parking lot scene look like a warm-up. 3,847 text messages between Haley and Kevin in the past 6 months. That's not a fling. That's not a mistake. That's a relationship running parallel to a marriage, bleeding it dry from the inside. But 6 months wasn't the beginning. That was just when they got careless. I cross-referenced dates, looked for patterns, and found the moment when the message frequency spiked from occasional to constant. 3 weeks after my father died. I sat with that information for a long time. My dad, who'd raised me alone after my mom left when I was 7. My dad, who'd taught me that a man's word is his bond, that you show up for the people you love, that the easy path is rarely the right one. My dad, who'd collapsed in his kitchen from a massive stroke and died before the ambulance could get there. I'd spent a month in Chicago after his death, handling the funeral, settling the estate, sitting in his empty house surrounded by 63 years of accumulated life, trying to figure out how to exist in a world where he didn't. And while I was doing that, while I was grieving the only parent who'd ever really been there for me, my wife was starting an affair with my friend. Something cold settled in my chest that night. Something permanent. I've carried it ever since. Tyler's office was exactly what you'd expect from a successful divorce attorney. Expensive enough to intimidate, comfortable enough to encourage long consultations. The art on the walls was abstract, neutral, deliberately chosen to avoid suggesting any particular emotional state. The desk was mahogany. The chairs were leather. Everything said, "This is where serious people handle serious problems." Tyler himself looked exactly like he had in college, just wrapped in a better suit. Same sharp eyes, same quick smile that never quite reached those eyes. Same habit of listening more than he spoke. "Tell me everything," he said, after his assistant had brought coffee and closed the door. "From the beginning. Don't leave anything out." So I told him. The race, the crash, the parking lot, the photographs, everything I'd discovered in the phone records the night before. By the time I finished, the coffee was cold, and Tyler had filled 3 pages of his legal pad with notes. "Arizona's a no-fault state," he said, setting down his pen. "Adultery doesn't automatically give you an advantage in asset division. The court doesn't care who did what to whom. They care about equitable distribution. So she gets half of everything even though she's been sleeping with my training partner? In theory, yes, but..." Tyler held up one finger. "Adultery can absolutely affect spousal support claims. Haley hasn't worked in, 8 years? She quit her job as a dental hygienist when we moved here. Said she wanted to support my career, handle the home stuff so I could focus on work. Right. Under normal circumstances, she'd have a strong claim for significant alimony. She gave up earning potential for the marriage. Now the marriage is ending. She needs time to rebuild." Tyler smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. "But you have a prenup." I'd almost forgotten about the prenup. We'd signed it 12 years ago, when I was already making good money and Haley was drowning in student loans. It had seemed prudent at the time. Just good planning, nothing personal. My accountant had recommended it. Haley had grumbled but agreed. "The prenup has an infidelity clause," I said, remembering the specific language now. "Both parties forfeit spousal support in the event of documented adultery." "It does. I helped you write it, remember?" Tyler leaned forward. "If you can prove the affair, and it sounds like you already have solid evidence, she gets nothing beyond basic asset division. No alimony, no long-term support, nothing." "Then let's prove it." "That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say." He slid a business card across the desk. "Connie Marsh, private investigator, former Phoenix PD, 30 years of experience, zero tolerance for drama. She'll find everything there is to find." I took the card. Studied the simple text. Connie Marsh, Investigative Services, followed by a phone number. "How much is this going to cost?" "Everything worth doing costs something." Tyler stood, extended his hand. "But take it from a guy who's handled 300 divorce cases. The ones who invest in documentation are the ones who walk away whole. The ones who try to wing it, who let emotion drive the bus, who think they can out-negotiate a trained professional without preparation." He shook his head. "Those are the ones I see back in my office 2 years later, trying to fix the mess they made." I shook his hand. "I don't lose, Tyler. You know that." I know. That's why I took the meeting at 8 a.m. on a Monday. He grinned. Let's go destroy her case. I moved into an extended stay hotel and told Haley I needed space to think. She texted constantly, a barrage of emotions that swung wildly between apologetic and accusatory, sometimes within the same message. I'm so sorry, this was never supposed to happen. You have to understand, you were never home. Training was more important to you than I was. I was lonely, Derek, so lonely. You can't just abandon me like this. We need to talk. This is partly your fault and you know it. I screenshotted everything, responded to nothing. Connie Marsh was everything Tyler promised. A stocky woman in her early 50s with iron gray hair, a handshake that could crush walnuts, and eyes that had seen every variation of human dishonesty the world had to offer. Kevin Brennan, she said, studying the file I'd prepared. Financial advisor, married to Megan Brennan, pediatric nurse at Phoenix Children's. 2 kids, 8 and 5. Members of the same triathlon club as you. She looked up. You sure you want to go down this road? Once I start digging, there's no telling what I'll find. I want the truth. All of it. Famous last words. She closed the file. I'll be in touch within a week. She was in touch within 4 days. The affair wasn't a recent development. They'd been meeting at the same mid-tier hotel in Scottsdale every Thursday afternoon for at least 5 months. Room 412, paid in cash, reserved under the name Johnson. Connie had obtained security footage of them entering the building together on 3 separate occasions. Footage that clearly showed them holding hands, laughing, looking at each other the way people look at each other when they think no one's watching. But that wasn't the worst part. Your wife asked you to let Kevin review your investment portfolio about 3 years ago, Connie said during our second meeting. Do you remember that? He's a financial advisor. She thought he might have some insights. I didn't see the harm. Right. Well, Kevin's had access to your financial information for 3 years now. Login credentials, account numbers, the works. Connie slid a folder across the table. I haven't found any evidence that he's stolen from you. Yet, but I'd recommend getting a forensic accountant involved before we go any further, just to be safe. I stared at the folder. Thought about all the times Kevin had helped me review my portfolio. All the friendly advice he'd offered about asset allocation and risk management. All the conversations we'd had about retirement planning and long-term security. Get the accountant, I said. I want to know everything. 2 weeks after the discovery, I attended a scheduled triathlon club dinner. My injuries were healing. The road rash had faded to an unpleasant shade of purple, and my wrist turned out to be just a severe sprain, not a fracture, but I still wasn't back to full training. The injury gave me a convenient excuse for my emotional distance. I watched everyone that night. Really watched. Noticed the way people looked at me when they thought I wasn't paying attention. The whispered conversations that stopped when I approached. The sympathetic glances from people who'd never been particularly sympathetic before. After dinner, my training buddy Eric Tate pulled me aside. Eric was a good guy, a firefighter in his mid-30s, built like a tank, with the kind of straightforward honesty that made you trust him immediately. Derek, I need to tell you something. He couldn't meet my eyes. I should have told you months ago. I waited. Let the silence do its work. Back in March, I saw Kevin and Haley together at a restaurant in Tempe. They didn't see me, but I saw them. He finally looked up. They were holding hands, leaning in close, looking at each other like... He trailed off. I convinced myself I was wrong, that there had to be an explanation, but I should have said something. Who else knows? I don't know for sure. But people talk. There were rumors, the way there always are. I think more people suspected than wanted to admit it. I processed this. All those club dinners, training sessions, and post-race celebrations, All those people who'd smiled to my face while knowing, or at least suspecting, that my wife was making me look like a fool. I appreciate you telling me, Eric, but I need you to keep this conversation private. Can you do that? Of course, man. Of course. He gripped my shoulder. For what it's worth, you didn't deserve this. Nobody does. I thanked him and excused myself early. Drove back to my hotel room and sat in the dark for a long time, thinking about trust, about loyalty, about all the ways we convince ourselves that the people around us are who we need them to be. 3 weeks after the discovery, Haley requested a face-to-face meeting. I agreed with conditions. We'd meet at the house and I'd be recording everything. Arizona's a one-party consent state. I only needed my own permission to document the conversation. She'd prepared a speech. I could tell by the way she sat on the couch with her hands folded in her lap, eyes downcast, projecting contrition like it was a performance she'd rehearsed in front of a mirror. She'd even dressed the part. Modest blouse, minimal makeup, the wedding ring conspicuously present on her finger. "Can I get you something to drink?" she asked, like we were acquaintances meeting for tea instead of a married couple negotiating the terms of their destruction. No. Derek, I know I don't have any right to ask for your forgiveness. What I did was wrong. I take full responsibility. She paused, waiting for me to respond. I didn't. She continued. But I need you to understand the context. Kevin pursued me. I was vulnerable after your father died. I know how that sounds, but it's true. You were so deep in your grief and then you threw yourself into training, and I felt like I was invisible. Like our marriage was just a formality you maintained between workouts. How long, Haley? The truth. She hesitated. Her eyes flickered to the left, a tell I'd learned to recognize years ago, back when we were just dating and she was terrible at keeping birthday surprises secret. She was calculating, trying to figure out how much I already knew. Haley, the truth. How long? 14 months, she finally said, so quietly I almost missed it. 14 months. More than a year. 420-some days of looking me in the face, kissing me goodbye, sleeping in the same bed, all while carrying on a full-fledged relationship with my friend. 14 months, I repeated. It wasn't planned. It just happened, and then it kept happening, and I didn't know how to stop. You didn't want to stop. That's not... She stopped, closed her eyes. Okay, maybe you're right. Maybe I didn't want to stop. Is that what you want to hear? Is that going to make this easier somehow? Nothing's going to make this easier. I just want the truth. After 14 months of lies, I think I'm entitled to that much. You looked me in the face every day for 14 months, I said. Every single day. Said, I love you every morning. Made plans for our anniversary. Talked about maybe starting a family. And the whole time, I never stopped loving you, Derek. You stopped respecting me. That's worse. I told her I'd filed for divorce, that she'd be served papers within 48 hours, that the prenup's infidelity clause would be invoked, and her attorney could fight it if she wanted, but she'd lose. The carefully constructed mask of contrition cracked. Underneath it was something harder, something calculating. You can't prove anything, her voice rose. It's your word against mine. Kevin will never... I have 247 photographs, hotel records, security footage, and your own text messages. Would you like to see them? She went pale. The fight drained out of her like water through a sieve. How did you... I'm a software architect, Haley. I solve complex problems for a living. You really thought I couldn't figure out how to access a shared phone plan? She sank back into the couch, all the practiced dignity evaporating. So that's it? 12 years and it's just over? That's what you decided 14 months ago. I'm just formalizing the paperwork. You should call a lawyer, I added, standing. An actual lawyer, not Kevin. He's got enough problems of his own. I walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard her start to cry. Real tears this time. not the performative kind. Derek. Her voice stopped me at the threshold. What happened to you? You used to be kind. You used to be the person who saw the best in everyone. I turned around and looked at her. Really looked. Probably for the last time. I used to be naive. You cured me of that. Kevin never told his wife about the affair. I gave him a week. He used it to hope I'd somehow forget or change my mind. When the deadline passed, I didn't send Megan the photographs. I did something worse. Kevin worked as a financial advisor for a regional investment firm. Solid reputation, good client list, the kind of career that depends entirely on trust. I contacted his employer and formally requested a compliance review of my account management under Kevin's supervision, citing concerns about unauthorized access to sensitive financial information. In corporate America, the words compliance review function like a magical incantation that summons paperwork from the depths of hell. Within a week, Kevin was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Within 2 weeks, the firm had discovered what Connie's forensic accountant had already found. Kevin was sloppy. Not criminal, at least not provably, but definitely cutting corners. Fiduciary shortcuts, documentation gaps. The kind of stuff that keeps regulators employed and compliance officers awake at night. Kevin showed up at my hotel 3 days after the investigation launched. He was shaking when I opened the door. Not from cold, not from exertion, but from something deeper. Fear, probably. The kind of fear you feel when you realize the walls are closing in and there's nobody to blame but yourself. You're destroying my life. He pushed past me into the room, pacing like a caged animal. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair uncombed, his eyes carrying the hollow look of someone who hadn't slept in days. Everything I've worked for, my career, my reputation, my whole... You're destroying your life, I corrected, closing the door calmly. I'm just asking legitimate questions about the management of my financial accounts. Whatever problems you're having with your employer, you created those yourself. Bull! He spun to face me. This is about Haley. Don't pretend it isn't. It's about accountability, Kevin. You had access to my finances for 3 years. You spent those years sleeping with my wife. Now you're surprised that I don't particularly trust your professional judgment? I walked past him, sat in the room's single armchair, and gestured at the desk chair. Sit down. You look like you're about to have a stroke. I don't want to sit down. I want you to call off your lawyer, your investigator, whatever vendetta you've got going. What I've got going is a divorce proceeding and a legitimate financial audit. Neither of which is a vendetta. Both of which are well within my rights. I studied him the way I used to study a difficult piece of code, looking for the bug, the weak point, the place where everything started going wrong. Did you really think there wouldn't be consequences? Consequences? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. My wife is asking questions. My kids are asking why Daddy sleeps on the couch. I might lose my license. And you're talking about consequences like this is some kind of lesson in a self-help book. It's not a lesson. It's cause and effect. You made choices. Now you're living with the results. Kevin stepped toward me, and for a moment I thought he might actually throw a punch. My wrist had mostly healed by then, but I wasn't in fighting shape. I tensed, ready to defend myself if necessary. But whatever courage had carried him to my door evaporated when he saw I wasn't going to flinch. He deflated, sinking onto the edge of the bed like a puppet with cut strings. We were friends, he said, almost whispering. I know I messed up, but we were friends, Derek. Doesn't that count for anything? It counted for everything. That's why this hurts so much. I leaned forward. You didn't just sleep with my wife, Kevin. You used our friendship as cover. Every time I trusted you, every time I let you into my home, every conversation we had about my marriage, you were using that information. You were finding the weaknesses, finding the opportunities. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. Haley told me. She told me how you pursued her, how you made her feel special, how you convinced her that I was the problem. That's not a moment of weakness. That's a campaign. He had nothing to say to that, because it was true, and he knew it. Your wife still doesn't know, does she? I asked. About Haley. I gave you a week and you didn't tell her. I couldn't. The kids. The kids. Right. I stood up, walked to the door, and opened it. I've been remarkably generous about that, Kevin. Don't make me reconsider. He left without another word, shoulders slumped, defeated. I watched him walk to the elevator, a man who'd thrown away everything good in his life for 14 months of feeling special. I closed the door and felt nothing in particular. Not satisfaction. Not pity. Just the absence of someone who should never have been allowed into my life in the first place. Haley hired a divorce attorney named Victoria Palmer, who had a reputation for aggressive tactics and expensive shoes. Victoria's opening move was to challenge the prenup's validity, claiming Haley had signed under duress because she was young, in debt, and didn't have independent legal counsel. Tyler and I had anticipated this. We produced documentation showing that Haley's uncle, a practicing attorney in good standing, had reviewed the prenup on her behalf before she signed. We produced the separate acknowledgement she'd signed, confirming she understood all terms. We produced evidence that they'd waited 30 days after her review before the wedding, eliminating any rush decision defense. Victoria's motion was denied without even reaching a hearing. But the discovery process revealed something unexpected. Connie's forensic accountant, digging through financial records in preparation for asset division, found a credit card I'd never known existed. Haley had opened it 18 months ago, in her name only, using her sister's address for statements. Balance: $34,000. Charges included jewelry, designer handbags, hotel stays, spa retreats. All things she'd told me were gifts from her sister or bargains from sample sales. $34,000 of lies, purchased on credit, hidden behind a smile. 6 weeks after the discovery, I got a call from an unknown number. Mr. Whitfield, this is Megan Brennan, Kevin's wife. Her voice was steady but raw, like she'd spent the last few days crying and was determined not to cry anymore. I found out. He finally told me, although told is a generous term for what he did. I'd like to meet. Compare notes, if you're willing. I met her at a coffee shop the next day. She wasn't what I expected. Stronger. More composed. The kind of woman who'd probably been holding her family together with sheer force of will while her husband pursued his weaknesses. Kevin told me it was only a few months, she said, wrapping her hands around a coffee cup she hadn't touched. A brief mistake. Momentary insanity, he called it. I slid my phone across the table, showing her the timeline Connie had assembled. 14 months of evidence, hotel records and security footage and text message logs that painted a picture of something far beyond momentary. Megan looked at the evidence for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was perfectly flat. He's still lying. Even now. Even when there's nothing left to protect. We agreed to share information. Our attorneys would coordinate on anything involving Kevin. And Megan revealed something valuable. Kevin had taken out a $50,000 loan against their house without telling her. She suspected some of that money had gone to Haley. Gifts, hotels, the currency of deception. If you can trace it, I said, it becomes evidence in both our cases. Dissipation of marital assets. The court doesn't look kindly on that. Megan smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant smile. No, she said. I don't imagine they do. Kevin's compliance investigation concluded 8 weeks after the discovery. He wasn't criminally charged, but he was terminated for conduct unbecoming a fiduciary professional. His securities license went under review by the state licensing board. Within 2 weeks, everyone in our triathlon club knew the broad strokes of what had happened. The club's leadership asked Kevin to resign his membership. He refused. Showed up to a group training session like nothing had happened, like he could power through the awkwardness by sheer force of denial. I was there that day. Training again, finally. Not at full capacity, but moving. The tension when Kevin arrived was thick enough to choke on. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. People suddenly discovered urgent needs to adjust their bikes, tie their shoes, be anywhere except near Kevin Brennan. He tried to join a pace group. 3 members immediately peeled off, citing schedule conflicts. He approached another cluster of riders. They suddenly decided to do hill repeats instead of their planned flat route. After 20 minutes of this, Kevin finally understood. He threw his bike into the back of his truck and drove off without a word. I watched him go, feeling nothing in particular. Not satisfaction, not pity. Just the absence of someone who should never have been allowed into my life in the first place. After the session, a woman approached me. Mid-30s, lean build, the kind of quiet confidence you see in serious athletes who don't need to prove anything to anyone. Derek Whitfield, I'm Stephanie Grant. I need to tell you something about Kevin. 3 years ago, she said, Kevin had pursued her aggressively. She wasn't interested. She was in a relationship at the time, and besides, there was something about Kevin that set off her internal alarms. But he wouldn't take no for an answer. The texts kept coming. The comments at training sessions became increasingly inappropriate. He started showing up at races she'd mentioned attending, always with some excuse for the coincidence. She'd eventually quit the club just to get away from him. Haley wasn't his first target, Stephanie said. She was just the first one who said yes. 10 weeks after the discovery, Haley sat for her deposition in Tyler's conference room. Victoria Palmer had coached her to be sympathetic, regretful, the picture of a woman who'd made a terrible mistake and was determined to learn from it. Haley wore a conservative dress, minimal jewelry, and the same practiced expression of contrition I'd seen at the house. Tyler wasn't impressed. He dismantled that picture one question at a time. Mrs. Whitfield, when did your relationship with Kevin Brennan become physical? I don't remember the exact. Let me refresh your memory. Tyler slid a document across the table. This is a text message from you to Mr. Brennan, dated October 3rd of the previous year. Would you read the highlighted portion aloud? Haley looked at the paper like it was a snake. That's taken out of context. Read it, please. Last night was incredible, she read, her voice barely audible. I can't stop thinking about you. October 3rd. Derek's father passed away on September 14th. Is it accurate to say your relationship with Kevin Brennan became physical less than 3 weeks after your father-in-law's funeral? Victoria leaned forward. Objection. Counsel is badgering the witness. This is a deposition, Victoria, not a trial. Let her answer. Tyler's voice was pleasant, almost friendly. The most dangerous tone he had. Haley swallowed. Yes, that's accurate. He walked her through the timeline, using her own text messages as exhibits. Made her acknowledge the hidden credit card, the lies about gifts, the $34,000 of debt she'd concealed from her husband. With each admission, her coached composure eroded a little more. Let's talk about the financial decisions made during your marriage, Tyler said, 2 hours into the deposition. You stated earlier that your husband controlled most financial decisions. Is that accurate? Derek made more money. He handled the investments. But you had access to all joint accounts? You weren't prevented from viewing or accessing any financial information. No, I could see everything. So when you opened a credit card in your name only, using your sister's address for statements, you weren't doing so because you lacked access to joint finances. You were doing so specifically to hide purchases from your husband. Haley's face went red. I didn't want him to know about the jewelry, the hotel rooms, the spa retreats you told him were gifts from your sister? Tyler pulled out another folder. We have the statements, Mrs. Whitfield. $34,000 over 18 months. Would you like to explain what you were purchasing? Victoria called for a break. It was denied. And then Tyler produced the exhibit that made Victoria audibly groan. A text message from Haley to Kevin, dated 11 months before the discovery. We should wait until after Derek qualifies for Kona. The prize money and sponsorship potential would mean a bigger settlement. Would you read that message aloud for the record, Mrs. Whitfield? Haley's hands were shaking. She looked at Victoria, who had nothing to offer. She looked at the paper. She looked at me, the first time she'd met my eyes since the deposition started. I was just... You were calculating the optimal timing for your divorce based on your husband's athletic achievements. Tyler's voice was almost gentle. You were planning to leave him, and you wanted to make sure you extracted maximum value first. Isn't that correct? That's not... I was confused. You discussed this with Kevin. You strategized together. You treated your marriage like a financial instrument to be liquidated at peak value. Tyler leaned forward. And you're asking this court to believe you deserve alimony, Haley broke down. Not the careful, performed crying from our meeting at the house. This was ugly, raw, the sound of someone watching their carefully constructed narrative collapse. Her shoulders shook. Her makeup ran. She aged 10 years in 10 seconds. He was never home, she gasped between sobs. He cared more about his training than he cared about me. I felt so alone. So alone that you couldn't file for divorce? So alone that you couldn't speak to a counselor? So alone that your only option was to pursue a 14-month affair while simultaneously planning to maximize your financial settlement? Tyler slid one more document across the table. A text message from 14 months ago, early in the affair. Haley to Kevin. Derek is the perfect husband. Sometimes I feel guilty, but you make me feel alive. Does that sound like a woman who felt neglected, Mrs. Whitfield? Or does that sound like a woman who knew exactly what she was doing? Haley had no response. Victoria called for a break. This time, Tyler agreed. I left the room to get coffee, and I could hear Haley's sobs echoing down the hallway. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt tired. But I also felt something else. Certainty. Certainty that I was doing the right thing. That some betrayals don't deserve forgiveness, only consequences. 2 weeks later, Haley's attorney advised her to settle. The evidence was overwhelming. A trial would be expensive and publicly humiliating. She could fight, but she'd lose, and she'd lose badly. The settlement terms were straightforward. The infidelity clause was enforced. 0 alimony. The house would be sold, proceeds split 50-50. Haley kept her car, her personal items, her half of our liquid assets. I kept my retirement accounts, which had been funded primarily before the marriage. Haley was responsible for the $34,000 in credit card debt she'd secretly accumulated. Final tally. Haley walked away with roughly $180,000. Without the prenup and the affair evidence, she would have received more than $800,000, plus ongoing spousal support potentially lasting decades. Before signing, I asked for a moment alone with her. The attorney stepped out, leaving us sitting across from each other at the conference table for the last time. I want you to understand something, I said. I'm not doing this because I hate you. I'm doing this because you were supposed to be my partner, and you chose to be my enemy. That was your choice. These are the consequences. Haley stared at the settlement documents. Do you think you'll ever forgive me? I considered the question seriously. I think I'll stop thinking about you. Eventually, that's better than forgiveness. She signed the papers. I signed the papers. Just like that, 12 years of marriage became a stack of legal documents and a collection of boxes in a storage unit. Megan Brennan's forensic accountant traced Kevin's $50,000 loan. $23,000 had gone to credit card payments. including the hotels and gifts he'd lavished on Haley. In their divorce, this became evidence of marital asset dissipation. Megan received 65% of their remaining assets and full custody of the kids. Kevin, unemployed and desperate, contacted me a few weeks after both divorces were finalized. He wanted to clear the air, maybe even rebuild the friendship. His voice on the phone had that hollow quality of someone who's lost so much that they've started to forget what they used to have. I agreed to meet him once, at a park where we used to do training runs. I wanted to see what he'd become. Wanted closure, I suppose. Or maybe I just wanted to make sure the lesson had stuck. He looked smaller than I remembered. Worn down. The confident financial advisor who'd once lectured me about portfolio diversification now had the hollow look of a man who'd gambled everything and lost. His clothes were wrinkled. His watch, the expensive one he used to flash at club meetings, was gone. Probably sold. "Thanks for meeting me," he said, standing awkwardly near a park bench. "I wasn't sure you would." Neither was I. We sat. Around us, the park was full of joggers, families, people living their ordinary lives. A year ago, Kevin and I had been two of those joggers, pushing each other through interval training, talking about race strategies and investment portfolios and all the things that men talk about when they're pretending to be friends. "I was unhappy," Kevin said finally. "I know that's not an excuse, but it's the truth. My marriage felt stale. My career felt like a treadmill. And Haley," he shook his head, "she made me feel important. Like I mattered. Like I was more than just a husband and a father and a guy who crunches numbers for rich people." "So you decided to destroy two families because you wanted to feel special?" "When you put it like that. How would you put it, Kevin?" He was quiet for a long moment, watching a family with two small children playing on the swing set. Maybe thinking about his own kids, who he now saw every other weekend in a supervised visitation room. "I'd say I was weak. I'd say I made the worst decision of my life, and then I made it again every day for 14 months. I'd say I hurt everyone who trusted me, including you." He turned to look at me. "I'm sorry, Derek. I know that doesn't change anything, but I need you to know that I'm sorry." I listened without expression. Let him talk. Let him explain himself until he ran out of words. Apologies, justifications, regrets, promises to be better. The full catalog of things people say when they're trying to rebuild a bridge they burned. When he finished, the silence stretched between us. A jogger passed, headphones in, oblivious to the quiet drama unfolding on the park bench. "So that's it?" Kevin said finally. "We're just nothing now? We were never what I thought we were. I just didn't know it." "Derek, let me ask you something." I turned to face him fully. If I hadn't crashed at mile 68, if I'd finished that race, gone to the parking lot, found Haley where she was supposed to be, if you'd had another few months, maybe another year, to keep this going, what was your plan? Were you going to tell me eventually? Or were you going to keep taking my advice, drinking my beer, pretending to be my friend while sleeping with my wife behind my back? He didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Because we both knew the truth. That's what I thought. I stood up. "Goodbye, Kevin." I walked away. Started a slow jog down the path we used to run together. Behind me, I could hear Kevin standing there, watching, not following. I didn't look back. There was nothing back there worth seeing. 1 year later, I stood in the pre-race area of Ironman, Arizona again. Same venue, same course, same Arizona sun turning everything into a furnace. I'd spent the year rebuilding. My wrist healed completely. I returned to training with a focus I'd never had before, not obsessive this time, but purposeful. I found a new training group, made genuine friends who didn't have hidden agendas. I sold the house Haley and I had shared, bought a smaller condo with a view of the mountains, Started learning what it meant to live for myself instead of for a future that was never going to arrive. And I went to therapy. Not for the divorce exactly, for the patterns that let the divorce happen. The willingness to ignore warning signs. The assumption that if I just worked hard enough, everything would be fine. The blind spots that had let me believe in people who didn't deserve my trust. At the pre-race dinner, I ran into Stephanie Grant, the woman Kevin had harassed 3 years ago. We'd stayed in touch over the past year, casual texts, occasional coffee, nothing heavy. She was racing this year too, her first full Ironman. Nervous? I asked. She laughed, terrified. You? More than I want to admit. I gestured at the venue around us. Last time I was here, I crashed at mile 68 and found my wife with my training partner. I'm hoping for a slightly better experience this year. Setting the bar low, I respect that. We talked for a while, about training, about race strategy, about nothing in particular. There was something there. I wasn't dead, I could feel it. But neither of us pushed. We'd both learned that good things don't need to be rushed. Maybe we could do a training ride after this, I said as we were leaving. If you're not too tired from beating me, she smiled. I'll make sure to go easy on you. Race day. The swim went smoothly. Calm water, clear sightlines, a solid performance that put me in good position for the bike leg. I thought about last year as I mounted my bicycle. Mile 68. The sound of the chain snapping. The long slide across asphalt. I passed mile 68 without incident. Passed mile 70, 80, 90. Finished the bike leg and transitioned to the run feeling stronger than I had any right to feel. At mile 20 of the marathon, I hit the wall. Legs screaming, lungs burning. Every step feeling like it might be the last one I could manage. I thought about quitting. The body always wants to quit when it's pushed past its limits. That's not weakness, it's biology. But I thought about other things too. The parking lot, the fogged windows, the photographs on my phone, the prenup with its infidelity clause, the list I'd made on a hotel notepad while my whole world fell apart. I didn't quit then. I solved the problem. One line at a time. I wasn't going to quit now. Mile 21. Mile 22. Every step of victory against the voice in my head telling me to stop. Mile 23. Mile 24. The finish line visible now, a thin sliver of possibility on the horizon. Mile 25. Mile 26. Point 2. I crossed the finish line in 11 hours, 42 minutes, and 17 seconds. Not a qualifying time for Kona, but a personal best. Proof that I could do something I'd never done before. I walked through the finisher's area wrapped in a space blanket, surrounded by other athletes in various states of exhaustion and euphoria. My phone buzzed in the pocket of my race belt. A text from Stephanie. Saw you cross. You looked strong. Drinks later? I smiled, typed back, only if you're buying. I'm officially too tired to argue. I looked up at the Arizona sky. The setting sun was turning everything gold. The mountains, the finish line arch, the faces of strangers who just accomplished something that most people never even attempt. For the first time in over a year, I felt something I thought I'd lost. Hope. Not the naive hope I used to have, the kind that assumes everything will work out if you just try hard enough. Something different. Something earned. The kind of hope that comes from walking through fire and discovering you're still standing on the other side. I'd trained 847 days for a race I never finished. But the race that mattered, the one against my own blind spots, my own willingness to look away from the truth, that one, I'd finally won. And maybe that was better than Kona anyway. 6 months later, I got the promotion at work. Moved into an office with actual windows. My boss said my focus had improved dramatically. Apparently, not spending all your emotional energy on a failing marriage frees up some bandwidth for professional excellence. The condo is quieter than the house Haley and I shared. Smaller. But when I look out the window at the mountains, I see possibility instead of obligation. Stephanie and I are dating now. Slowly. Carefully. Both of us carrying scars we don't pretend aren't there. We train together on weekends, cook dinner at my place on Wednesdays, text each other stupid jokes during the workday. Nothing flashy, nothing desperate. Just two people who learned the hard way that trust is built in inches, not miles. I ran into Tyler at a bar last month. He'd just closed another case, another marriage torn apart by lies and lawyers. We had a drink, talked about old times, talked about what comes next. "You did good, Derek," he said. "Most people in your situation, they either cave or they go nuclear. You stayed in control, played the long game, protected yourself without becoming someone you'd hate." "Barely," I admitted. "There were moments I wanted to burn everything down." "But you didn't. That's the difference between winning and just surviving." He raised his glass. "To discipline." I raised mine back. "To discipline." As for Haley, last I heard, she moved to California. Fresh start, new city, all the usual promises people make to themselves when they're running from consequences. The $180,000 from the settlement is probably dwindling fast. She was never good with money. She's working as a dental hygienist again, back where she started. 12 years of marriage converted into a handful of lessons she probably still hasn't learned. I don't wish her ill. I don't wish her anything. She's simply not part of my story anymore. Kevin is selling cars in Tucson now. His securities license was permanently revoked. He sees his kids every other weekend, drives a sedan instead of the F-150, tells himself the whole thing was bad luck and timing and circumstances beyond his control. Some people never understand that they're the architects of their own destruction. That's not my problem anymore. I still race triathlons. Not obsessively, not as an escape from a life I don't want to examine, but because I love it. The early mornings, the long miles, the moment when your body says it can't go any further and you push through anyway. I haven't qualified for Kona yet. Maybe I will someday. Maybe I won't. The goal doesn't mean what it used to mean. Because here's what I learned. Standing in that parking lot with my heart in pieces and my wrist in a splint, the finish line isn't where you think it is. It's not at the end of a race or the dissolution of a marriage or the moment when your enemies finally get what's coming to them. The finish line is wherever you decide to stop letting other people's choices define your story. I decided. I stopped. And then I started running again, towards something better.